Hello, this webinar is titled The Statue of Liberty, an Historical Overview, the Extended Version. I want to give acknowledgement to researcher Myron Sevy, the founder of the Legacy of Liberty project, for his input and content into this video. In 1865, it was just weeks after the end of the American Civil War, at a dinner party in France, Edward René de Laboulaye, a politician, historian, and professor of law, and chairman of a French anti-slavery society, and French sculptor Frederic Auguste Bartholdi bannered about the idea of a Statue of Liberty. Laboulaye proposed that something, such as a monument, be built, which would honor this elusive ideal of liberty and celebrate 100 years of French-American friendship and possibly spur France to restore liberty at home, where there had been much unrest. In 1865, Laboulaye had personally been involved raising money to produce a gift coin for the U.S. President. Abraham Lincoln was greatly loved by the average Frenchman, but shunned by the French government. Upon his assassination, the gift was redirected to his widow, Mary Lincoln. Over 40,000 Frenchmen contributed to the effort. The medal was sent via diplomatic courier accompanied with a note, "Tell Mrs. Lincoln that in this little box is the heart of France." In Laboulaye's mind, the United States was now positioned to be a beacon of liberty to the world. Over the previous 70 years, France had seen 9 changes of government. Each change came with violence and bloodshed. He believed the American model could point the way for France. Meanwhile, France continued to be embroiled in war. 4 years passed. The idea continued to churn in Laboulaye's mind. Bartholdi was preoccupied with a proposal for a giant monument at the entrance to the Suez Canal in Egypt. The Suez monument was eventually rejected, however. Bartholdi, instead of being discouraged after the long years of planning and preparation, now turned all of his energy to the liberty idea. In reality, the Suez monument was the ideal schooling for their American project, he thought. The concept of building a colossal monument, the largest statue ever to be constructed in modern times, without financial assurances of any kind, and celebrating not a person, but an idea, was probably both frightening and electrifying. This would be a statue unlike any that had ever been built. What should a monument to a concept look like? Where would they ever get the money? It wasn't government funded. Where would it be built? How could it be built? Did the American people care? Did the French? The two men obviously had no answers to these questions. Finally, in 1871, the wars in France stopped. It was just concluding another bloody war, and this time with Prussia. That same year, it was decided that Bartholdi would now visit America seeking support for their idea. Entering the New York harbor, he saw an island that he knew would be the perfect site. "I will try to glorify the Republic and liberty over there in the hopes that someday I will find it again here in France." The colossal statuary does not consist simply in an enormous statue. It ought to produce an emotion in the breast of the spectator, not because of its volume, but because its size is in keeping with the idea that it interprets and with the place with which it ought to occupy. Laboulaye had similar sentiments. The statue is well named. She is truly liberty, but American liberty. She is not liberty with a red cap on her head and a pike in her hand stepping over corpses. Ours in one hand holds the torch. Not the torch that sets a fire, but the flambeau, the candle flame that enlightens. In her other hand she holds the tables of the law. This statue, symbol of liberty, tells us at one and the same time that liberty lives only through truth and justice and light and law. That is a powerful quote that needs to be fully understood and embraced. This is the liberty that we desire, and that will remain forever the emblem of the alliance between America and France. Well, 4 years passed, and construction finally gets underway. By 1875, on a quiet residential street in Paris, construction finally began. To give the project a broad base of popular support, Laboulaye wanted the statue to be paid for by the widest possible number of contributors. The statue was to be a gift from the people of France to the people of the United States, and she would celebrate an ideal, liberty. Well, in 1875, Liberty's bust was put on display in Paris to build enthusiasm and to help with fundraising efforts. The initial response seemed promising. A couple of French cities contributed 500 and 1,000 francs each. A metals manufacturer offered to provide all the copper. "I am not a prince, but I love liberty," said the owner. "I love America, and since I'm in a position to do it, I'd like to show that a Frenchman can match the Americans in patriotism." However, this early support fell off. The original plan was to present the statue to an enthusiastic American public at the 100th birthday celebration of the Declaration of Independence in 1876. But because of the project funding delays and the wars in France, this was not to be. So the new plan was to send Liberty's arm and torch to the American celebration. Bartholdi would come as well and drum up support, but unfortunately the arm and the torch did not arrive until August. But his presentations finally began to build American enthusiasm. Once people saw the arm, they got a true sense of just how large this statue would be. Enthusiasm grew even more. In early 1877, President Ulysses S. Grant made a formal request to Congress to rename Bedloe's Island to Liberty Island and make it available for this project. After much debate, Congress agreed, and it was signed into law on March 30th, 1877, President Grant's last full day in office. In 1879, however, the French structural engineer on the project suddenly died without leaving a plan for the structural framework. A statue of this size would need to carry the statue's weight of 120 tons and withstand winds of over 100 miles an hour that occasionally hit the eastern seaboard. It needed to allow the statue to sway, but not collapse. Well, enter Gustave Eiffel. He was the only engineer in Paris that could meet the tremendous challenge of designing the interior framework. It took Eiffel the rest of 1879 and 1880 to design his framework. Notably, in the 1980s, 100 years after the statue's dedication, modern engineers using computer-aided analysis found Eiffel's design to be as brilliant today as it was when he designed it. Well, in 1880, a French committee made its final push to raise the necessary funds to finish the statue. In 1881, the framework began to grow on the outskirts of Paris, rising well above the roofs of the neighboring buildings. In 1882, tragedy struck again. Laboulaye, the originator of the idea, died. Ferdinand de Lesseps, promoter of the recently completed Suez Canal, took over as president of the project. The arm and the torch were brought back from New York after a 5-year visit and added to the nearly completed statue. In 1884, after 13 years of construction, the statue, Liberty Enlightening the World, stood towering over a French neighborhood. The ownership of the statue was transferred to the United States of America on July 4, 1884, but it remained on display in France. It remained on display for the rest of the year, and tour buses passed through the neighborhood were always jammed. Finally, in December, the statue's 350 individual pieces were taken apart and packed in 200 crates for shipping. On May 21, 1885, the naval transport ship Ezra loaded up the Statue of Liberty and began the journey toward the United States of America, arriving June 19th of that year. Meanwhile, in 1885, the American Committee had languished for 9 years. The foundation had been poured, but nothing more. America had been focused on settlement of the West, rapid industrial growth, and thousands of new inventions. A statue building project simply did not generate much enthusiasm. In March of 1885, there was only $2,800 in the account, and by March 10th, work on the project stopped. The pedestal was non-existent. The Statue of Liberty would arrive in just over 3 months. Enter Joseph Pulitzer, who's the namesake of the Pulitzer Peace Prize. He came penniless to America in 1864. He fought in the Civil War. He bought a paper in St. Louis, and in 1883 he brought his talents to the New York World newspaper. Pulitzer saw that the upper-crust New Yorkers had failed to provide the needed funds for the statue's pedestal. He called the inability to fund the pedestal a national disgrace, blaming New York millionaires for their refusal to contribute. The millionaires didn't budge. So he went to his readers and made this plea. Here in the commercial metropolis of the Western world, where hundreds of our citizens reckon their wealth by millions, where our merchants and bankers and brokers are spoken of as princes, we stand haggling and begging and scheming in order to raise enough money to procure a pedestal on which to place the statue. The dash of one millionaire merchant's pen ought to settle the matter and spare the city further humiliation. It would be an irrevocable disgrace to New York City and the American Republic to have France send us this splendid gift without our having provided even so much as a landing place for it. There's but one thing that can be done. We must raise the money. The World is the people's paper, and it now appeals to the people to come forward and raise the money. The $250,000 that the making of the statue cost was paid in by the masses of the French people, by the working men, the tradesmen, the shop girls, the artisans, by all, irrespective of class or condition. Let us respond in like manner. Let us not wait for the millionaires to give this money. It's not a gift from the millionaires of France to the millionaires of America, but a gift of the whole people of France to the whole people of America. Take this appeal to yourself personally. Give something, however little. Let us hear from the people. Pulitzer's message rang true, and the great outpouring of support was electrifying. Every week on the front page of the World was a list of all the donors, no matter how small the contribution. Pulitzer's pleas awakened the generosity of the average American, and money began to flow in from across the nation. School children emptied their piggy banks, workers gave up their lunch money. In 2 months the World collected over $52,000, and by June, when the statue arrived, almost the full $100,000 to finish the pedestal had been raised. By August, 120,000 people had contributed. It was altogether fitting that after the millionaires had turned up their noses at the project, in the end it was the pennies, nickels, and dimes of America's working-class men and women and their children that would provide the money to put the Statue of Liberty on her pedestal. What had never been accomplished in 7 long years of fundraising was accomplished in a mere 4 months. In 1885, with some of the excess money that had been raised, a beautiful globe-shaped trophy was made at Tiffany's, which was presented to the sculptor Bartholdi. Meanwhile, a smaller version of Liberty was donated by Americans living in Paris to the people of France, and it can be seen to this day near the Eiffel Tower. On October 26, 1886, the statue, Liberty Enlightening the World, was officially dedicated. New York City celebrated with a grand parade, and the harbor was filled with boats. Businesses threw ticker tape out their windows in celebration, which was the first instance of a ticker tape parade, and President Grover Cleveland and other dignitaries provided remarks. But at the end of the day, this gift was a gift from the people of France to the people of the United States, a project over 20 years in the making. For all the hard work by committees and the hundreds of people who worked on the statue, the story of the Statue of Liberty is largely the story of a few determined, talented individuals with strong convictions who fought through all the impossible obstacles. Liberty was not to be lost in some city park. She is to be the tallest monument in modern times. Liberty's position facing out to sea is highly symbolic. The ideas of liberty were to be a beacon of light out to the rest of the world. My name's Craig Seibert. Thanks for listening.